Prime Minister, we're here in Ukraine, and while meeting with President Zelensky today at his palace, the presidential palace, there was a Russian drone hovering overhead. It was shot out of the sky while you were having your meetings. What did President Zelensky say to you about it afterwards?
Well, I think for both of us, but for everybody who experienced it, you get a real sense of what the Ukrainian people are facing every single day. Yeah. That wasn't a one-off incident. Their resolve is incredible. Whatever the challenge, they have this determination to get through it, this real sense of national pride, civilian pride. I saw the same. We went to the hospital this morning and saw those that had come back from the front line with terrible burns. One of them was a 60-degree burn. It was hard to see. And I spoke to those patients, and their resolve was incredible, as was the staff in the hospital. So, I mean, for us, of course, you know, that's the first time we've experienced that, but for Ukrainians, that's everyday life.
It's pretty audacious, though, isn't it, of Russia to do that while you're there?
Well, look, it's an example of the fact that Russia knows no limits here. This aggression is unrelenting, and Ukraine is paying a very heavy price on a daily basis.
And you're here to talk about what happens next. You've said Britain must put Ukraine in the strongest possible position for negotiations so they can secure a just and lasting peace. Could that peace involve British troops being deployed as part of a peacekeeping force?
I've said Ukraine must be in the strongest possible position, whatever happens next. And it's really important that we don't let up on this, because we don't know what's going to happen next. I do know the Ukrainians want
we know
peace.
that President Trump wants a peace deal. He said he wants a deal within 100 days.
Whether it's peace, whether it's continued fighting, Ukraine must be in the strongest position. And that's why I've been really clear with my message on this. We must be clear the strongest possible position. That can't be words.
But it has shifted. There is a new reality. Your language has shifted. We're now, instead of talking about open-ended war, allies are now talking about negotiations, and Trump's team are talking about a deal within 100 days. Things have changed.
Well, yes, of course, there are lots of discussions going on about what might happen next. And that has to be led by President Zelensky, and that's why it's important for me to be here having my 7th meeting with him to have that discussion. So you're right in that sense. But I do have a concern that we can't simply assume something's going to happen in 50 days, 100 days, whatever it may be, and somehow let up on this absolute requirement for Ukraine to be in the strongest position. Because whether you're negotiating or whether you're continuing to fight, being in the strongest possible position is really important. And today was about not the words, it was about the action, which is why we saw some of the joint
It was about showing solidarity and unity and the symbolism of that. But in the substance of it, would you be prepared to deploy troops for peacekeeping? This is an open discussion amongst allies. Macron's talking about it. You met him last week. Just in principle, would you agree to do that?
Well,
in principle,
I've been discussing this with a number of allies, including, of course, President Macron, including President Zelensky here today. And we will play our full part. We have always been one of the leading countries in relation to the defence of Ukraine, and so you can read into that that we will be playing our full part. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, because this has to be enduring, it has to be lasting, it needs to be sufficient
so you're
to deter
prepared to do it, but
aggression.
you're prepared to do that.
Well, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I do and have indicated that we will play our full part, because this isn't just about sovereignty in Ukraine, although of course it's about that. It's about what the impact is back in the United Kingdom and our values, our freedom, our democracy. Because if Russia succeeds in this aggression, it will impact all of us for a very, very long time.
And what would you say to British people that might be listening to this, viewers back home, that think, we don't want to get dragged into this, we don't want our troops to get dragged into any peacekeeping, we don't want to get dragged into any sort of more direct conflict or engagement with Russia? What would you say?
Well, I understand that. We are, of course, fully committed to Nato, and we're already deploying troops on a number of frontiers, as you know. And we're doing that because that impacts on our safety and security. And so for me, as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the number one priority is the safety and security of everybody in the United Kingdom. But that safety and security starts on this front line here in Ukraine. But also, I would also say this, the conflict in Ukraine has had a huge implication back at home in terms of prices,
Yes.
in terms of the cost of living crisis, and therefore this isn't something remote. It's every day back in the United
President
Kingdom.
Zelensky said today the US, Hungary, Slovakia, Germany could not see Ukraine in NATO. That is quite a big shift in position. I haven't heard him say that before. Why is he saying that?
Well, NATO had a summit back in the July of last year and agreed an irreversible path for Ukraine into NATO membership, and that's the right course. I think President Zelensky is, frustrated. He'll speak for himself in relation to the progress. But what I think is
it's not going to happen in the foreseeable, is it? Because Trump's not keen. That's the reality, right?
We've agreed an irreversible path, but we have also got to be absolutely clear-eyed about the need for any security presence to be effective in its deterrence of Putin, because the worst thing could happen here is a cessation of hostilities without that deterrence, only for Putin in a year or two or three to come again, and we cannot allow that to happen.
Marco Rubio said, the US incoming Secretary of State, that there's going to have to be bold diplomacy, and it's important everyone's realistic. There will have to be concessions made by the Russian Federation, but also by the Ukrainians. Is that Zelensky's concession, acknowledging that the NATO membership is kind of parked for now? Is that what you talked about?
Well, I'm not going to disclose everything that we talked about. And I think it is really important to be clear. We aren't at that stage, and that's why there's a conflict going on, there's a war going on. Every day it's a heavy price for Ukrainians, and we have a duty, which is why we were talking. Today was symbolic, as you rightly say. It was important to have the visit, but also we discussed capabilities, we discussed training, we discussed drones, we discussed the industrial work we'll do together on defence, because for me politics is about action, not performance. And if we say we're going to put Ukraine in the strongest position, we have to follow that up with our actions.
Prime Minister, when it comes to Trump, his election is completely changing the terms of trade. The shift from fighting in Ukraine to discussions about negotiations, the rush to a ceasefire in Gaza, criticism from NATO, threat of 20% tariffs, ambivalence now over the Chagos deal, which you've pressed pause on. He's completely changed the terms of trade, hasn't he? Well, this is a new reality, right?
We haven't got to inauguration yet, but yes, of course, there are changes. There's going to be a change of administration. I had the chance to discuss that with President-elect Trump back in September, when I spent a couple of hours over dinner with him. Spoke to him again before Christmas on the telephone. In that call, we discussed the situation in Ukraine, and our teams are discussing all the time.
I'm talking about a bigger point, which is he's changing the rules of the game. He's upending the status quo. He is, isn't he? You're going to have to adapt to a new reality under Trump.
Well, I think if it comes to Ukraine, we're working with the US on a daily basis, and we will continue to do so. We both envisage that, and that's clear from my conversation with President-elect Trump. We should pay tribute to the US for their role here and their future role here. In relation to the ceasefire in Gaza, that's something that is long overdue. We've been calling for a very, very long time.
And rushed through just before Trump takes power.
You know, these negotiations have been going on for a very long time. I'm, very pleased that progress has been made, and I hope that we can go through the phases, or the proposed phases of the ceasefire, because this is hugely important for the hostages, hugely important for Palestinians who've suffered so much.
And on the Chagos deal, you had agreed that with President Biden. Now it's on hold. Why?
Well, the most important thing about the Chagos deal is to say the legality of the base was in doubt, and that's why it was important that we secured it, because that is a vital base.
But President Trump wants you to look again, or he wants to have a look at it.
Of course, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing, and it's basically agreed. But in the end, I mean, with the Chagos deal, it's really important not to lose sight of why it matters. This is a vital base.
And also, you don't want to get into a row with him before he's even in office, right?
No, I mean, look, this isn't about a particular president. That base is vital for the UK, absolutely vital for the US. The long-term future was put in doubt legally I'm glad that we've got an agreement
Okay.
to secure that base, because in the end, that's the thing that matters most. That's the national interest that we have at stake here.
I need to ask you one other thing about Trump, because in the theme of everything being upended, Musk, I know you don't want to comment directly on him personally, I'm not going to ask you that, but he isn't just a tech billionaire and an owner of a massive social media platform. He's also an official in the Trump administration, and he's interfering in the UK's domestic affairs. Now, normally, in all circumstances, that breaks diplomatic protocols. It hurts the relationship. Don't you have to raise it with Donald Trump?
Well, look, I take every challenge as it comes, Beth. And I've got, and I hope I've established, a good relationship with President Trump. We built that relationship when we had dinner together. There was a good rapport between us. He was very keen to turn off the lights and show me New York, and it was fantastic for him to do that. I've subsequently spoken to him. So, as you'd expect, as with my domestic politics, I ground it in the reality. I ground it in actions and making progress. And I'm pleased that we've had constructive exchanges. We'll continue to do so.
Final question, what's Trump's greatest strength?
Well, he's come back quite remarkably in American politics.
The ultimate survivor.
Well, resilience, and I mean, this is an incredible political comeback. I think that nobody could say other than that. On a personal level, I'm pleased that before the result, I was able to begin to build what will be an important personal relationship between us. We got on well, it was constructive. And it's been my business to make it constructive, because that's the right thing for our two countries, and I'll continue to do so.
And just what's his weakness?
Well, I'm not going to start having a discussion like that in an interview like this.